were people in the arena watching to see if the weather hit, or was everybody just 100% focused on the game?
Everybody was focused on the thunder inside of the arena and not the thunderstorms outside of the arena, as far as my knowledge goes yesterday.
Of course, nothing really threatened Oklahoma City, but I guess there was that potential. So
I tell you what never threatened Oklahoma City was the Nuggets.
welcome back to the Daily Thunder podcast. I'm John Napier, publisher of Daily Thunder, and I'll be your host today. Alongside me is Daily Thunder beat writer Brandon Rahbar. Brandon, how are you leading up to the Western Conference Finals?
I am doing well. I'm excited to be talking about a team that is going back to the Western Conference Finals. That game was a lot of fun, Game 7, and having a team in Oklahoma City again that has a true chance to go to the NBA Finals now it's a lot of fun, John. Like, it's exciting. You can just feel the excitement in the arena and amongst Thunder fans right now.
Actually, I think there's great excitement around the city. The buzz has really started to hit its peak as I call it, like, the casuals have really started to pick up their excitement about the performance of the team, because, you know, you're seeing people wearing their Thunder shirts everywhere, out at the grocery store, out at restaurants. You see the car flags everywhere. My neighbor, as a matter of fact, has 2 car flags on their SUV, and they've put, what do you use, shoe polish to write on your car, and they put writing on all the windows about the Thunder and the playoffs. Like, people are in it now.
Are you promoting the Daily Thunder podcast to your neighbor? Are you letting him know?
I should. I need to figure out what my neighbor's name is.
Hi, my name is John. I've lived next to you for the past 5 years. Can I tell you about my podcast?
Yeah. Well, hey, there's something in common now that we have.
Yes, exactly. And it's cool because the Thunder is the one thing, sports-wise, that does bring, like, almost every Oklahoman together, because there's OU fans, there's OSU fans, there's Tulsa fans. But with the Thunder, and you see it when the Thunder are really good, like they are this year, I'm with you. I'm seeing more and more shirts. It does bring the city and the state together, and it's really cool and fun and exciting to see.
Well, like, we've had a pattern here on these podcasts where we end on a good result, and then we get optimistic, and then we recap the last 2 games, and there's a bad result and then a good result. So the same sequence applied here. Game 6, not the best result. Game 7, entirely different result. So let's take our mindset back to that Game 6. I think everybody was fairly nervous about Game 6 because it would have been really nice to just close out the Nuggets and not have that high pressure Game 7 do or die situation. And it was the Nuggets, though, that came out with that energy and force, and like, they knew their season was on the line in a way the Thunder really wasn't approaching that game. How do you think the Thunder came out in Game 6?
I think that they came out with the right mindset in Game 6, and they came out, I thought, playing well, considering that we knew the Nuggets were going to give their biggest punch in Game 6. It was a home game, and they were desperate, and this is a championship team. They weren't just going to roll over and give the series to the Thunder. They have Jokic. This was always going to be a tough way to close the series, was to try to win a Game 6 in Denver. And I thought that the Thunder played really well to start that game, and things were going really, really great because the Thunder got up 58-46, and then Shea picked up that 4th foul, and it all unraveled from there.
Yeah, and I was, really focused on that first quarter where the Nuggets jumped out to a 10-point lead, 30-20, kind of late in the first quarter. But then the Thunder kind of dialed in, started playing their game. You noted they built up that 58-46 lead with just 2 minutes to go in the second quarter. And then the wheels just kind of came off over those final 2 minutes. To me, the key thing was Shea picking up his 3rd foul. What do you think was the difference in that, kind of that meltdown over the final 2 minutes?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Shea picking up that 4th foul and having to go to the bench. The Thunder up by 12, and the Nuggets scored 12 straight and tie it 58-58. Lou Dort hit a 3 at the buzzer, at the halftime buzzer, so the Thunder go in 61-58. But the damage had been done. And it was just tough to recover from that, especially from the fact that that fourth foul still had ramifications in the second half because Shea had to go to the bench early. Again, he went to the bench with like 7 minutes left in the third quarter. And once again, the offense stalled out with Shea on the bench. And at the end of the third quarter, the Nuggets go on a big run. So it was 2 big runs from Denver that really changed this game. At the end of the second quarter, when Shea went to the bench in the final 2 minutes, and then the final couple minutes of the third quarter, when out of nowhere, Julian Strawther comes in and scores 8 out of Denver, 10 points in a 10-0 run.
Yes, right. I'm sorry, this is fourth foul, but yeah, it's exactly right. It was a pretty close third quarter, teams going back and forth. But then again, the final 2 minutes of that third quarter where Shea hits a shot, ties the game, it's 80-80, and then the wheels come off again. So if you take out the final 2 minutes of the second quarter and the final 2 minutes of the third quarter, the Thunder win this game.
Yes, absolutely. That's really was the difference in the game, those 2 little stretches at the end of the second and third quarter. It really, really was. And that was the story of the game. Also, the foul trouble with Shea made a big impact, I think, in this game during those stretches. And fouls, once again, were a storyline, unfortunately, because the Nuggets shot twice as many free throws, 32-16, as the Thunder in that game. So, which, that's been kind of a storyline throughout the regular season, even despite the Thunder's historical point differential and 68 wins. They've had issues with free throw disparity. Now, a lot of that is the Thunder do foul a lot because they are very, very physical and very, very handsy, and they swarm you. It's the other end, though, like when they don't get the free throws on the other end despite driving. So kind of went off on a separate tangent. I just feel like that was like one of the things that stuck out about the game that was a difference maker on a scoreboard in a low-scoring game.
Something else we talked about leading into Game 6 was maybe the fear that the Thunder had really kept Jokic in check. And you're just sort of waiting and wondering when Jokic is going to have a big game. Do you think he had his big game in Game 6? He scored 29 points, but he shot the ball really well. He was 9-14 from the field. He was 10-12 from the line. He had 14 rebounds, 8 assists. Was he a difference maker in this one in ways that he wasn't in prior games?
I mean, yes and no. Jokic had such a strange series where, he had an all-timer game and the Nuggets lost. Then he would have, kind of for him a real stinker, and the Nuggets won. I think this was a pretty good game. This wasn't like the game, like if you're a Thunder fan that you're fearing that Jokic has and just completely dominates you. But he obviously had a good game, but it was just more so like Strawther hitting 15 points off the bench out of nowhere. Jamal Murray, I thought, had a good game as well. And, Jokic obviously didn't help matters because he did have a very, very solid game. But, it's so funny because 29, 14, and 8 for Jokic, we're like, that's a pretty good game. But I think it was more Jamal Murray's 25, Brown's 23, and Strawther's 15 that really sealed the game.
And I would agree with that. And I had that same feeling after this one that Jokic had a really solid game. But it wasn't Jokic that beat the Thunder in this one and made me fearful that in a game 7, the 3-time MVP was going to show up, right, and be a massive difference maker, have that potential to have one of those huge games that kind of marks his career in a dominant game. But before we get to that point, because maybe that's a little bit of a segue and a preview of Game 7, we can talk about the bench. You mentioned Strawther had a huge performance. He had 15 points off the bench, and he was 3 of 4 from 3. And then sort of the other pieces of the Nuggets played really well. In particular, Christian Braun had a great game. He had 23 points, 8 of 14 shooting, 3 of 6 from 3, also 11 rebounds and 5 assists. And you compare that to the Thunder's complementary pieces. The bench didn't have the best game. I think Caruso played pretty well, but the shooting wasn't there for the bench. And then the second scorer for the Thunder, Jalen Williams, J-Dub, had probably his worst game of the playoffs so far.
Yeah, he did. He only scored 6 points. The shooting was rough from J-Dub. He did contribute in other ways like he always does. Obviously, always good defensively. He had 10 assists, 7 rebounds. And, there's kind of a lot put on him because he was running the show when Shea had foul trouble and had to sit in the second and third quarter. So, from a playmaking standpoint, I thought he played really well, but he obviously didn't shoot well, which was a big talking point at the end of Game 6, and I think is important to look at in the context of what he did in Game 7. But yes, J-Dub scoring 6 points, it's going to be tough for the Thunder to win, close playoff games like that.
Well, maybe we can segue now into Game 7 because the Nuggets did what they had to do to force a Game 7. Fortunately, that Game 7 was going to be in Oklahoma City for the Thunder in front of the home fans at the Paycom Center. But the two storylines for me going into that game, at least what I thought the storylines would be, was were we going to get, that dominant Jokic game where he's going to come out and play with fire and try to will his team to the next round? And would we see Jalen Williams recover from a poor shooting night and a night in which during the game and post game, a lot of the fans and social media were really dragging hard on J-Dub for his 3 of 16 performance. And then we had another variable come into the game where it was announced by Shams that Aaron Gordon suffered a hamstring injury that would require multiple weeks to heal, and he was doubtful. And then, of course, he played. So those were kind of the storylines leading into the game. What were your thoughts before the tip?
Yeah, before the tip, the Aaron Gordon thing was such a huge talking point, and the fact that Shams came out and said he had a grade 2 hamstring strain and it would take a month to recover. I mean, we all just automatically assumed, of course, he was going to be out because nobody plays on a grade 2 hamstring with 2 days rest. Steph Curry just had a grade 1 hamstring and missed that entire round 2 series against the Wolves. And that's no diss on Steph. That's just what happens when you have hamstring strains. So that was a big talking point. It was just weird that he wasn't automatically ruled out and he became a game time decision. You didn't know if it was gamesmanship. But as far as like the game overall, I said beforehand that I thought the Thunder would win because they had home court. The Nuggets had the experience. They'd been in so many Game 7s that you were a little bit worried from the Thunder standpoint that the Nuggets' experience and the Thunder's kind of lack of experience and youth would show up in a Game 7. But for me, it came down to the fact that Loud City is a huge home court advantage, and I still just thought that the Thunder were the better overall team. Despite it being a 3-3 series, I thought if you look at like the overall minutes played throughout this series, that the Thunder were overall the better team, and I thought that would play out in a fairly close game that the Thunder would win by about 8 points or so. So I thought the Thunder would win. I never saw this blowout coming, though.
Yeah, and the first few minutes of that game, Denver looked dialed in. I thought we were going to get a dominant Jokic. He was getting to the line really, really easily and putting the Thunder in difficult places. And so the Nuggets just jumped all over the Thunder early in the game. But then the Thunder had a counterpunch. What do you think was the key to that initial counterpunch after the Nuggets took a double-digit lead early?
Alex Caruso, when he came off of the bench, the energy in the arena changed. Like, it was strange, because we talked about experience versus youth, and you saw it play out in the beginning. And there was such a nervous energy in the building as the Nuggets built that double-digit lead early on. The Nuggets looked like they'd been there and done that before. And the Thunder, besides Shea, looked timid, like a little nervous to shoot, a little nervous to play their game. And then Alex Caruso came in off the bench, and like he brought this force, he brought this energy, and I really thought that shifted the game. There's a sequence where he played defense on Christian Brown, who jumped off to a really great early start, and he caused a travel in the corner. And the crowd loved it, and he like walked up to the crowd and kind of like psyched them up. And I thought it was a pivotal moment, and the Thunder go on that run to end the first quarter from 21-10 and 24-14 to 26-21 at the end of the first quarter, and it felt like the game shifted right there, and it did shift because that run continued on to start the second quarter.
Yeah, I think that moment that you highlighted was the one that stuck out to me. Caruso's trapping Brown in the corner. And I mean, he's just absolutely relentless. And that energy, I think, sparked the team because the defensive intensity for the Thunder just went up a notch from that point forward and never went down after the remainder of the game.
Yeah, and that's what changed the game was the defense. Like the Thunder played such a great game overall, but it all started with their defense, and it started with that defensive intensity. And that defense led to so many turnovers and fast break points. And when you're scoring like that, you build your confidence. And the crowd got into it. The crowd became, that crazy loud experience that we all expected from a Game 7 Thunder crowd. So the crowd's into it. The team's feeling more confident. They're feeling more loose. They're playing to their identity, which all season has been, defensive intensity leading to turnovers and fast break points. So when you're scoring like that from easy, fast break points and defense and turnovers, that all spills over. The confidence spills over. And then the offense gets easier. And the Nuggets, they lose the momentum and it just all snowballed. It was interesting, though, because the Thunder took that lead early in the second quarter. They had this big run. But, of course, the Nuggets, they're a championship team. They still had a punch left in them. They were right there with the Thunder for most of the second quarter until, again, just like Game 6, where the Nuggets took true control of the game at the end of the second quarter on a big run in the last couple of minutes. That's exactly what the Thunder did to the Nuggets at the end of the second quarter in Game 7.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned a couple of things that stood out as to like why the Thunder were able to win 68 games, forcing those turnovers, getting those buckets, because early in the game especially, the team was shooting really, really poorly from three. They were getting great looks, but nothing would go in the basket. And so the defense is what changed the game, and they sort of dialed it up, and they did ultimately force 23 Nuggets turnovers. They had 16 steals. It led to 37 points for the Thunder, just 7 points scored by the Nuggets off of turnovers. The Thunder had 27 fast break points. They scored 64 points in the paint. They kept the Nuggets off of the offensive glass. Each team had 15 offensive rebounds. It was all the hallmarks of what make the Thunder such a good team is that even on a night when they're not shooting the ball particularly well, they just have other ways to kind of beat teams into submission.
Yeah, they do. That defensive unit is the best unit in the playoffs. Like when you look at every team's offense and every team's defense, I think that the Thunder's defense is better than any team's defense, obviously, or any team's offense. And when they are playing like that, when they are swarming you, when they got their hands everywhere, when they're causing turnovers, I think it's pretty deflating for the other team, and it leads to this offensive explosion. The Thunder can kind of just like come in waves where they go on these huge runs, these 10-0 runs, these 15-0 runs, and they can just dominate you for little segments of the game. And that's what happened in this game. They just dominated the Nuggets, in little spurts, and it led to this, from this close game to this blowout.
Well, going back to Alex Caruso, one of the game-changing adjustments that Mark Daigneault made in this one was putting Caruso on Jokic. What did you think about that at the time, and where do you think that idea came from?
It's so funny. When the Thunder traded for Alex Caruso, one of the very first talking points was about how Alex Caruso, his defense scales, and how he could defend fours like Kevin Durant and Giannis. I don't think any of us ever imagined that he would be defending fives, and much less the best five in the world in a Game 7 in the playoffs. But here he was doing it. All credit and kudos to Mark Daigneault. Alex Caruso is an all-world defender, but I did not see this coming. When you have Chet, when you have Isaiah Hartenstein, when you have Jay Will, who'd played pretty well on Jokic, you just assume it's going to be one or a combo of those three guys. I never expected Alex Caruso. I think it came because, this is what Mark Daigneault does. He experiments. He tries things. He likes to play small, and he saw something, obviously, that worked. Alex Caruso really bothered Jokic. He got up in his body. He was allowed to play physical, probably because, he's a guard playing against a 7-footer and giving up all that size. And he just hounded Jokic. And it wasn't just Caruso. Caruso defended him, but he would be swarmed by other bodies and weak side help from Chet and from whoever else was out there, Hartenstein. So big ups to Mark Daigneault. What a move, and what a move to pull out in a Game 7. It changed the game. It absolutely changed the game. Jokic only attempted one shot, I believe, in the second half, or what? He made one bucket in the second half. That's what it was. He made a 3-pointer in the second half at the end of the third quarter with 11 seconds left. That was his only. He had 5 buckets all night. Just a dominant defensive performance from the Thunder, led by Alex Caruso.
Yeah, Jokic only took one shot in the second half. It was that made 3. He didn't go shoot a single free throw line. He scored 3 total points. I mean, he was completely taken out of the game. And, that defensive adjustment, I'm not sure that works over a 7-game series, but to catch the Nuggets off guard, it worked beautifully. And one other thing that I noticed was, yes, you have Caruso doing such a great job of just being physical and making life miserable for Jokic despite the size disadvantage. But sort of that timing of the help defense and the collapsing in the paint was spot on. It's like everybody's eyes were focused not only on their guy, but what Jokic was doing. And so anytime he'd sort of turn into the lane where he would, make that extra pass that he often does, or move towards the bucket to, kind of make that push shot in the lane or something like that, people were ready. Like, they knew exactly when he was going to make that turn, when he was going to try to find that guy to pass it, and already swarming him on the ball, active hands. It was just well scouted and well executed by the Thunder.
Yeah, the Thunder obviously have done their homework this matchup, and here you are in a Game 7, so you get to know your opponent really, really well. The Thunder coaches do, and the Thunder players do. And, I mean, it was hard for the Nuggets to even make an entry pass to Jokic. Like, just getting him the ball, the Thunder made it so difficult between Caruso and between that help defense, just trying to get Jokic the ball. And if you can just deny Jokic the ball, that's half the battle. I mean, it was just such an impressive defensive performance. I'd be remiss. I got to mention at least, Aaron Gordon ends up, of course, playing this game, which, shout out to Aaron Gordon to play with a grade 2 hamstring, gutted this out, and looked honestly pretty good for having a grade 2 hamstring. But he definitely was not fully himself. And, a lot of what the Thunder could do offensively, I think, Aaron Gordon not being himself defensively. And then, you're you're making it that much tougher on Jokic when, his weapons just aren't at 100% either. So you're taking away Jokic and you're swarming bodies at Jokic, the defensive attention that he got. And you're probably just like that much, a little bit less worried about his health now. Because, yes, he has Jamal Murray, but then he has Michael Porter Jr. with a bum shoulder, and he has Aaron Gordon with that hamstring strain. So what the Thunder did defensively, just incredibly impressive. And I think that to do this in a Game 7, like you said, big shout out to Mark Daigneault.
Let's give another shout out. Let's give a shout out to Jalen Williams. Again, he had a rough Game 6. He was getting, dogged and dragged on social media after that performance, but he had a fantastic performance in this one, especially in that second quarter where he scored 17 points in the second quarter alone. He led the team with a plus 22 in the second quarter alone. How about J-Dub's bounce back game?
Jada was outstanding, and I loved it for Jalen. Jalen worked so hard. Jalen has been such a huge key to the Thunder success all season. He deservedly was an all-star. He might make third team all-NBA. He could make an all-defensive team. And, to see, the criticism he got after Game 6. Look, he didn't, shoot well in Game 6, obviously. And if the Thunder are going to advance, they're going to need more scoring from their secondary scorers. So for him to respond in the biggest game, not only of his life, but of the second Thunder era, and they need it. He swung the game. That 17 points he scored in the second quarter, that's when the Thunder took control of the game. I mean, they were down 5 after the first quarter. They obviously had some momentum after the first quarter going into the second quarter. But J-Dub scored as many points in the second quarter as Jokic did the entire first half. They both had 17 at halftime, and J-Dub had all of his in that second quarter, and that swung the game. I was happy for J-Dub to respond that way in the biggest moment of this young Thunder team's, this era. For him to swing the game, I just thought after that game 6 and the criticism he got was just such a great response, and I was happy for him.
100%. And we can give a lot of shout outs to the various performances. Cason Wallace had a great game. I think he was dialed in defensively, causing havoc in really special ways. But I do want to talk about Shea, the likely MVP in a game 7. And I'm not sure it was a really loud 35 points. It was like the kind of 35 points that you kind of say like, what's Shea done? And you look at the box score and he's like put in a ton of points, but he had an incredible game. He had 35 points. He shot 12 of 19, 3 of 4 from 3, and also had 5 assists, 2 steals, and 0 turnovers.
Shea was incredible. It's so funny because, we're this far along into the podcast and we're just now talking about Shea's game, but that's because for good reason, because of J-Dub's game, because, the Aaron Gordon talking line, the defense, and Alex Caruso. So it's crazy that Shea has spoiled us to the point where he can score 35 points on high efficiency with 0 turnovers. And, we're just now talking about it. He's just spoiled us. He was incredible. He obviously outplayed Jokic in a game 7, which, the big talking point was Jokic and the Nuggets, they're former champs. They've been in game 7s. The experience, could override the Thunder's youth and inexperience and maybe the talent edge that the Thunder have. But Shea, to score 35 points on 12 of 19 shooting and to have 0 turnovers, Shea was just outstanding. And not only did Shea outplay Jokic in this MVP head-to-head battle in a game 7, win or go home game. If you look at the overall series, Shea outplayed Jokic. I mean, it's funny because, he struggled in a couple of games and the big talking point with the zone defense and then doubling and trapping Shea and making other players beat them from the Thunder. If you zoom out, overall, Shea had the better series than Jokic. Jokic is incredible, and obviously the Thunder had the better defense, and they focused all that defensive attention on Jokic, so there's reasons why, Jokic struggled throughout the series. But overall, it's so funny because I've seen, online you'll see, some national talking heads that voted for Jokic for MVP, and they're like, oh, yeah, see, after, a Denver win, I feel good about my vote. Jokic, should have won MVP. Do you watch this game that the Nuggets won? But no, if you voted for Shea, you should feel really, really good.
I feel really, really good about Shea. I really would feel a lot better, though, if they announced that he won the MVP.
You know what? I think that the NBA decided for good reason that awarding Shea the MVP would probably give some sort of competitive advantage one way or another to one team, since you had the two MVP finalists facing off in a very close 7-game series. So I think it was a decision made from a competitive standpoint, I would imagine. I bet you that's why that decision was made, to delay rewarding Shea the MVP.
Well, we're going to preview the Western Conference Finals between the Thunder and the Wolves, but to put a button on this series and Game 7 in particular, the Thunder did all that work during the regular season to have the best record in the NBA. What they earned was home court throughout the playoffs. And I think this series demonstrated how much home court mattered, especially in that Game 7. The crowd was dialed in. It was, I'm sure you can tell, just your ears have maybe started to come back from all the noise there. And that could have been a difference maker as well. Just the energy that was in the arena from the players to the crowd in a pivotal Game 7, Loud City really brought it.
Loud City was incredible. They were, they lived up to the name, absolutely. And this Thunder team feeds off the energy of the crowd. When you have a defense like this and it comes in waves, they absolutely feed off the energy of the crowd. And J-Dub, talking about J-Dub having that bounce back game, maybe no player feeds off the Thunder crowd energy like J-Dub does. So absolutely. Look, the Nuggets just played in a Game 7 series the series before against the Clippers, and they won in a blowout because they were at home over the Clippers. And here you are, the Thunder. You earn this home court advantage throughout the regular season. It means something to win 68 games. You earn this right to play in front of your home crowd and to get this advantage, and it obviously made a huge difference in Game 7.
Well, now let's advance to that Thunder-Wolves series where the Thunder have home court. They will start the series tomorrow, Tuesday, recording this on a Monday, at home. It's going to be the number 1 seed Thunder versus the number 6 seeded Timberwolves, but the Timberwolves have really cruised through this playoffs. They won in 6 games over the, was it 6 games over the Lakers?
Yes.
Yeah, 6 games over the Lakers.
Five.
Oh, yeah.
Five.
Yeah, they've won both of their series in 5. That's right. They won in 5 over the Lakers, and of course they won in 5 over the Warriors, who were shorthanded without Curry, but still dominated that series. Looking at Game 1 and the rest versus rust scenario that went in the Thunder's rest favor leading into this one, but now it's in the Timberwolves' favor tomorrow night. Do you think the energy that the Thunder have from that Game 7 win will help them in Game 1?
I think it will help, because the Thunder crowd is going to bring it. This is the Western Conference Finals. It's Shea versus Ant. And, this Thunder team plays so well at home like we just talked about. As far as the rest versus rust, obviously the Timberwolves are going to end up having 6 days off versus the Thunder only having 1 day off. But we saw in the Nuggets Thunder series, the Thunder had all that time off after that Grizzlies series, and the Nuggets went 7 with the Clippers and only had 1 day off, and the Nuggets stole Game 1 in Oklahoma City. I think the Thunder are in a rhythm right now. I think they're playing really well right now. Obviously, they have some momentum. So I don't think the rest versus rust thing will end up making that much of a difference. I think the home court advantage will make a difference, and I think that the team that plays better will end up winning. So I don't necessarily think a rest versus rust thing will make a huge difference here. You probably favor the Timberwolves in that debate as far as do you want the rhythm or do you want the 6 days rest? You probably would want the 6 days rest, but I don't think that means that the Wolves are going to win this thing.
Well, let's start to break down the series as a whole. I think, to me, the big question is going to be, how do the Thunder play the size that the Wolves bring, along with Anthony Edwards on the perimeter? Do you think there are going to be any interesting adjustments that the team is going to make in this series that we haven't seen yet?
I think that the Thunder have so many things they can go to, so many options. I think that they will continue to start the double bigs with Chet and Hartenstein. But we saw Alex Caruso, the second half of Game 7 against the Nuggets. Caruso started that second half over Hartenstein. So I would not be surprised to see a quick trigger from Mark if the Thunder start double bigs, but they decide that a lone big is the better way to go, because Chet and his three-point shooting can draw Gobert out of the paint. And that could be an advantage for the Thunder, to take a multi-defensive player of the year player who loves to live in the paint and to protect the rim out of the paint. So the Thunder have some options there. But I think they'll start with double bigs, but I would not be surprised to see them switch it up and see Chet and Hartenstein alternate at the 5 during this series. It's weird because the Wolves do have a lot of size between Gobert and Randall and then Naz Reid coming off the bench. So the Thunder could choose to match that, or they could choose to make the Wolves change up and change their game plan based on the fact that the Thunder can play small.
Yeah, and do you think that, getting Hartenstein this season is to play a team like the Wolves with a little more size? And usually
yes,
run out that double bigs?
Yeah, I think so. It's so funny because last year, when the Thunder, Nuggets, and Wolves were clearly the 3 best teams last year, one of the big narratives was that the Wolves and Nuggets had so much more size than the Thunder did, and how would the Thunder handle that size? Well, the Wolves traded away Karl Anthony Towns for Julius Randle, so they gave up some size that they had last year, and then the Thunder go out and get Hartenstein. So the Thunder are definitely more equipped now to take on teams like the Nuggets and the Wolves that have this size. But I am very, very curious to see what Mark Daigneault does. Just because Rudy Gobert is such an interesting part of all this, his defense is so elite at the rim, but you can choose to maybe try to pull him out or make the Wolves make some tough decisions with Gobert, with Chet shooting. But then you have Hartenstein, who maybe you can just match with Gobert, and both of them are kind of like non-shooting bigs, and let them go at it. But I would imagine the Thunder would play like J-Dub on Julius Randle. So I'm very, very curious to see how this, plays out.
Yeah, and I think one big difference in the way that the Nuggets defended the Thunder versus the way that the Wolves could potentially defend the Thunder is the Nuggets didn't have, that shot blocking presence like Gobert in the paint that the Wolves had. And so their defensive strategy was really just to collapse everything on the paint and force the Thunder to try to kick it out to shooters. And it was effective at many times. It really did take Shea and J-Dub out of their games when they couldn't get into the paint, and there was just this mess of bodies with the zone defense. But the Wolves don't necessarily have to resort to that. I think they can rely on Gobert to patrol the paint and block shots at the rim. But does that open up the mid-range game for J-Dub and for SGA?
Yeah, which, Shea and Dub love to live in the mid-range. Shea in particular, one of the best mid-range, the best mid-range shooter in the game right now when you look at volume and efficiency. And J-Dub is great as well. Look, you're right. The Wolves want to play straight up because they have Gobert to protect the rim, and they have great defenders like Jaden McDaniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and even Anthony Edwards is a really good defender. So they'd like to play straight up. But we did see the Wolves play some zone, particularly against the Thunder a little bit in the regular season. They were one of the first teams to actually pull that against the Thunder, so they could go to that. I think it was a blessing in disguise, though, that the Nuggets played so much zone against the Thunder. Now they are used to that. And I think that they really kind of figured some things out against that zone. And Shea truly figured some things out against that Nugget zone. That Nugget zone bothered Shea for a few games. But if you look at the last 2.5 games, it was the second half of Game 5. Shea came out and he was elite. He was Shea. He was the MVP that second half of Game 5. And even though the Thunder lost Game 6, Shea continued to look like Shea. It wasn't bothering him anymore. And then in Game 7, of course, he scores 35 points really efficiently. And so I think the Thunder playing against that Nugget zone so much, Shea figured some things out, and I think the team did as well. So I think they'll be more equipped if the Wolves do decide to pull out the zone.
Well, and I think the Wolves are a little bit better equipped defensively, I think, as you noted, to defend the perimeter, to defend Shea, to defend J-Dub than the Nuggets were, who lacked a lot of defensive perimeter defense. Do you think that puts more pressure on the Thunder role players to step up when the Wolves have some elite defenders, Jaden McDaniels in particular?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Wolves are just a better defensive team than the Nuggets, for sure. The Nuggets got by and played really good defense because of the scheme, because of the zone, and because of the effort picked up definitely in the playoffs compared to the regular season. And I think Adelman probably had something to do with that. But the Wolves just have better personnel, like across the board defensively, to defend not only Shea, but also, just overall from the rim protection to having 3 defenders on the perimeter. I think it does put more pressure on the Thunder role players to hit shots. But I also think that the Thunder probably won't need to score as much against the Wolves as they did against the Nuggets, because I think the Thunder defense, they don't have to focus all of their attention on Jokic anymore. Like, he just tilts your entire defense. Obviously, Anthony Edwards is an incredible player, and he's going to get points, but the Thunder have the perimeter defenders, to throw on Ant, and they have, guys to throw at Julius Randle. They don't have to bend their entire defense to stop a guy like Jokic. So, whereas, yes, I think that the Wolves are more equipped to play better defense against the Thunder, I think the Thunder defense will shine even more against this Wolves team. And so the Thunder won't need to score quite as many points as they did against that elite Nuggets offense.
And then talking about some of the role players, I want to talk about Isaiah Joe in particular, because in the Nuggets series, he was a non-factor. He really didn't have a role in that series. Do you think he has a role in this one?
I do because, Isaiah Joe in that Nuggets series, all their guys that they were playing had a lot of size. And so it was tough to play Isaiah Joe just from a size standpoint, because even their guards, I mean, like, you're looking at, like, obviously he's not going to take Jamal Murray. And then Russ, like, his size and physicality, it's hard to play Isaiah versus him. Christian Brown has a lot of size for a guard. But I think that you can get by with playing Isaiah Joe. Like, if you're playing him against, like, say, Mike Conley, like, at this point, that's fine. And I think there's guys that you can play Isaiah Joe. Definitely, I would expect Isaiah Joe to have a role against the Timberwolves. You want your best three-point shooter, and make no mistake, Isaiah Joe is the Thunder's best three-point shooter. You want him to play against this Wolves team and this defense for sure.
Well, are you ready to make some predictions? Because the betting market seem to think that the Thunder are going to win this series. They are the leaders in the betting markets for not only to win this series, they're a minus 375 favorite over the Wolves, and also a minus 185 favorite to win the NBA Finals. What is your prediction?
My prediction is whoever wins this series wins the NBA title, whether it's the Thunder or the Wolves. I think they are the two best teams remaining. All due respect to the Knicks and Pacers, and it's been a lot of fun watching the Knicks and Pacers, upset those teams in the East. I have the Thunder in 6. I called the Thunder in 6 over the Nuggets. It took 7. I know 6 is a weird one for a home team because that means you're winning, a closeout game on the road in Minnesota. But I don't know. That's just the number. It feels like it. I don't feel like this is a 5-game series. That's too short. That's shortchanging the Wolves. I think they're a really good team. But I don't think this one goes 7, so I have OKC in 6.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of feel you there too. I'm not sure that the Thunder close out the Wolves with the Wolves at home in a game 6. And if it's another game 7, we've seen what the Thunder can do in a game 7 now as they did against the Nuggets. So I see this one potentially going 7, but I do think that the Thunder match up really well against the Wolves. Feeling very optimistic about the odds that we're talking about a Thunder Finals here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Thunder are a better team. I mean, it played out in the regular season. The Wolves did play a lot better the second half of the season once, kind of Julius Randle got comfortable in the system and they got Randle and DiVincenzo back from some injuries. They played really, really well down the stretch. Now, a lot of that, their schedule was pretty soft to end the season. And then, their playoff run has been dominant, 4-1 in both of these series, but they got a Warriors team without Steph Curry, which means it was not the Warriors team. And then they got the Lakers who, on paper look scary because it's LeBron and Luka and Austin Reeves have been playing really well. But then you realize, oh yeah, they don't have any center. They don't have any depth. They don't have any size. They don't have any defense. And so the Wolves kind of expose, the Lakers' weaknesses. All that said, I do think that the Wolves have become a little bit underrated. They are not at all a typical 6 seed. You got to remember, like 2 through 7 in the West, they were basically, coin flips down the line, which was, the better team and record-wise, they were all right there, and especially with how the Wolves closed the season. So the Wolves are a very, very good team. I think they've kind of become underrated, but all that said, the Thunder are better, and they have home court advantage, so I like the Thunder to win this one.
And to close this out, let's move over to the East since you brought up the East. I think maybe the first thing I want to ask is, did we not give the East enough credit, though? Because the expectation was that Cleveland and Boston would run away and they'd meet in the Eastern Conference Finals. Neither of those teams are in the Eastern Conference Finals. And, maybe the Cavs have a little bit of an injury excuse. The Boston Celtics really don't because they didn't lose Tatum until kind of that decisive game. And then, the Pacers have looked really, really good. And of course, the Knicks did what they did. So should we be giving the Pacers and the Knicks more credit, or did we just give the Celtics and the Cavs too much credit?
I think we gave the Celtics and Cavs too much credit. But I mean, the Celtics were the defending champs, and they looked dominant at times, and it seemed like they would turn it on in the playoffs. And then the Cavs, were dominant all season long. It's very, very, atypical that you would have these two dominant teams both go out. So I think that everybody thought that the Celtics and Cavs were going to run through the East and were headed for an Eastern Conference showdown. in the finals, but I think all of us did that. Not just us, but everywhere. I think that I saw the ESPN panel, it was a consensus on both of those. I mean, that's just everywhere. The Pacers did make the Eastern Conference Finals last year, and it's everybody forgot about that. And they have a great, great offense, and they have some solid defensive players as well. And the Knicks have a great starting five and a solid six man. And now Mitchell Robinson is back, so I think that the Knicks became underrated for sure. I think the Pacers and Knicks did become underrated, but I think it was more so overrating the Cavs and Celtics, but for good reason.
And who's your pick to come out of the Pacers Knicks Eastern Conference Finals? And who do you want to see if the Thunder advance, if it's different?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the Pacers are playing so well. I don't know. This is so tough. That is such a coin flip. I could see that going either way. Half the time I see the Knicks coming out, and half the time I think about it, I see the Pacers. I love the Pacers offense, and I think they've been the more impressive team in the playoffs because the Knicks really struggled against the Pistons. That was a closer series than it looks. So I am kind of slightly leaning Pacers, but from a who I want to advance standpoint, all due respect to the Pacers, if I end up going and traveling to the finals, the Thunder playing a finals and possibly winning a finals in Madison Square Garden, what that would mean from a national narrative, the Knicks finally make it back to the finals, and then you have the small market Thunder, if they were to beat them, winning that finals against the Knicks, I think would, mean so much. But at the same time, I'm a small market guy, and I'd love to see Indiana, Oklahoma City. I'm sure Adam Silver would hate it. So either way, I think would be a lot of fun.
Well, I'm rooting for the Knicks to advance for the reasons that you mentioned. A series between Madison Square Garden and the Paycom Center, the biggest of big markets in New York versus the little market of Oklahoma City. The Knicks finally having a great season after decades of ineptitude against the Thunder, finally breaking through that ceiling since 2012 to make the NBA Finals with the kind of the youngest team ever to reach the finals if they were to do it. Just to me, seems like the narratives would be great. It'd be fun, exciting. I think eyeballs would dial into this series. And of course, I would feel pretty good about the Thunder's chances to take home a championship. But still, we got to get through the Western Conference Finals. It's probably going to be a little bit of a brawl between the Wolves and the Thunder, two very physical teams. And I cannot wait for the series to get kickstarted tomorrow night.
It's going to be a lot of fun. This is going to be a fun series. And like I said, I do think that these are the two best teams remaining. So I really like, the Thunder's chances, if they were to get past the Wolves, to beat the Pacers or Knicks in a potential finals. These are the two most complete teams. The Pacers are very deep. The Knicks are not that deep. They have 7 guys. But when you look at offense and defense and top-end talent, I think Thunder Wolves are the two best teams remaining. So this series, I think, is going to be a lot of fun, and Loud City is going to be electric tomorrow night for Game 1.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in to the Daily Thunder podcast. I'm John Napier, host of the podcast, and he's Brandon Rahbar, Daily Thunder beat writer. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to the Daily Thunder podcast on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you like what you hear, do us a favor, leave us a rating and a review wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back in your feed soon.